Hi guys, welcome. Hello, hello. Good morning. Good morning here in Brussels, and good morning also to the people on the stream. My name is Niklas Goldsman, and we're on the Odoo Experience 2024 here. Very nice to have you listening today. I'm going to talk a little bit about utilizing Odoo, especially for non-governmental organizations, non-profits, and then also for the government. I think what you can understand from our key points here is that this is not a presentation about usual B2B, business to business cases, but about our experiences in the B2G sector. So all of our work has been done together with either non-governmental or governmental organizations, and especially focused on non-profits. My agenda is I'll be introducing myself, I'll be introducing the organization that stands behind this work. I'll give you some first learnings and steps out of the projects we've had, especially cooperating with Odoo and governmental projects, and then I will give you a couple of use cases, explain a little bit what we did and how we utilized Odoo. So let's start. Again, my name is Niklas Goldsman, very happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. You can have my contact details at the end of the presentation as well, and I'm managing director of a company that is called Zukunft digitale und offene Verwaltung. For those not speaking German, that roughly translates to the future of digital and open administration, right? So we utilize Odoo mostly for administrative purposes, so governmental purposes, and also non-profits. And the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to introduce you to Much Consulting. Much Consulting is one of the biggest German Odoo partners, as a gold partner. We have in our consulting about more than 70 engineers and consultants. We do Odoo projects in all over Europe, basically, some of them out there as well. And what we did is we founded a new daughter company that solely focuses on B2G. Because in the last years we came up with a big problem. I don't know what happened in your countries, but in Germany we had a big wave of Corona hitting us, and we had a lot of lockdowns and a pandemic, and we kind of figured out that our state was not digitalized at all yet, and there were a lot of problems coming up with that. And in our origin story is that we were helping out schools, especially during the pandemic. And what happened is that in a school, there was a young child that committed suicide due to depressions, cyberbullying, and like really heavy stuff. And when the school reached out to their administration department, they absolutely needed somebody to consult them and to guide them through there. So they needed an expert on how to talk to the kids and how to talk to the teachers to help them cope with what had happened, right? And then the school administration came to us and said, we have a problem. It takes us over 1 year to find the correct expert and to bring this expert into the school and to help children and teachers with their problem in their coping mechanism. And when we went to the school administration board and asked them, what is happening? How is it possible that this hugely important case takes more than 1 year? We started looking into their processes and how this gets managed. And we figured out that step number 1 is the school, to ask the administration, had to print out a PDF form, fill it out by hand, and fax it. I shit you not, we are talking 2022, and fax it to the school administration board. In the school administration, there would be about 200 faxes from over 1,000 schools getting in every week. Then there would be a person sitting there reading through all these manual papers and trying to figure out which experts they could send in which school and what the problems actually were. So after having printed out manual PDFs and forms, they were sent by fax to an administrative person that was only in charge of figuring out these cases. And as you can all probably imagine, it has been pretty frustrating for everybody who has been working in the school and the school boards and the Federal Ministry of Education, because this was a very hard case where they needed help fast. And what we did is we used an Odoo open source version because we kind of figured out that all of their problems were basic problems that you could actually solve with an ERP system. I think the mic was disconnected. I hope you can hear me again. Thank you. Brilliant. Sorry for that. So what we did in our origin story, we figured out that we could just to help them in a very fast way, take Odoo, open source, put all schools and all teachers as users in there, and just take this easy form, this PDF that they had, put it on an Odoo website, so that every user that sends a request, the request is there in real time, and that the administrative person who works on the end knows which request came from what school with what problem in real time, and has a database of all experts that they could manually give to the school in that problem case. Just as a step one, just by this first baby step of digitalizing their process, we could help reduce the time that it took to about 2 months. And then of course, we developed this, we continued developing this, because at the end, knowing what the school requested and knowing what experts you have and what they offer as solutions could be completely mapped, right? Which meant that over the 2 years that we helped digitalize all of that, we could reduce the time it took from a request from a school to actually get help, get, for example, a teacher training on something, from over a year to under 2 weeks. And I want to be honest with you, it still took 2 weeks. It's not be done in 48 hours, because there are still 1 or 2 people in the ministry that needs to tick a box and say, okay, because the ministry is going to spend money on this, and every time the ministry spends money, they need a human to be there and to say check. It could be done even faster, but we're still working on the mentality of, do we really need a check every time, or can we just automate the whole thing to be even faster? But I think, to be honest, in terms of having reduced the time that we can get help to schools from over a year to in under 2 weeks, has been a great success that we have been really proud of. And when we looked at that, we said, okay, we need a complete division that we create as a different company and unit, and that's why we created the Zukunft Digital and Offene Verwaltung. At least for now, for the German market, this is where we started 1 year ago. And I think if there's maybe 1 or 2 people here who have children, I think that is a good sign for our children, that the help gets to schools faster than it has been in the past. So what are usually clients of ours? With whom do we work together? We work together with either non-profit organization, like for example the Matrix, or companies like the Phil, who are responsible on handling all AR technology for the whole state. We work together with, for example, health, faith-based organizations like the Orders of St. John, or we were in talks with the Maltese. We work together with the Open Source Business Alliance, or with the Bavarian AI Network. So usually with organizations who have one thing in common, that they are run or funded by state money. So either it's a governmental organization who spend our taxpayer money, or it's an organization that can receive donations and that handles, let's say, public money, and then that has a tax exemption and advantage, but which comes also with a lot of documentation purposes. And that's why our expertise goes into this direction, where we focus ourselves in. So what happened over the last couple of years? I don't know if you've heard that. I'm not sure in terms of the audience how many of you are German, or how many of you know Angela Merkel. I hope that some of you still do that. And still in the year 2013, so we're talking 10 years ago, we had a big quote of her saying that the internet is new. The internet is new land for us, which meant that in the German mentality of digitalizing our businesses and especially our government operations, we are quite new to the game, if I can say that with a little laughter, because we only started realizing these problems about 10 years ago. Then COVID hit, and a lot of stuff has not been digitalized, at least in our countries. Maybe I'd like to later on get a question or a comment on of your countries, how digitalized you are already. And that meant that about that time, we made a new law that came into place, and that is called the Online Zugangsgesetz, which means that every of our citizen has to write to get help from the government and to get a point of contact with the government for whatever service of the government they need in an online way. Which does not mean that the whole process is digitalized, but it just means that the point of contact towards the citizen has to be done online. What does that mean now in reality? In reality, that means that if you're a student in Germany and you get help from the government and you get a little money to survive during your studies, there's generous programs for that actually are able to hand over money to the students to help them with the cost of living and rent and stuff like that. That meant that 10 years ago, students had to fill out a PDF form, send it via the post, and then half a year later get their money. And now that means that the student has the right to have an online interaction with the government. That means that this PDF file is now a website where the students can give in their data and information, but the reality is that this online site that the students fills out now gets saved and printed as a PDF file inside the government institution and then printed out to be handed and handled in paper. And you can imagine how much work that is. That means for the student, or for in this case the citizen, it seems like the government has renewed something, but only the first step, which means we have, let's say, 10, 15 more years ahead of us of actually thinking through these processes and looking at what happens behind the scenes. How can we automate? How can we make sure that the funding gets where it needs to be done? What kind of rules and regulations do we need to adapt? And you can imagine that in our work, there is a lot of political juggling and also creation of new legislation to help and actually further digitalize our government operations. For that, I can highly recommend Odoo, especially in its open source versions. Why? Because it has a very comprehensive functionality. We have all the tools that we usually need for these kind of cases, right? We usually have a good CRM system where you can manage all the users. It's super scalable, so if somebody says, okay, we need this to be handled with 10,000 students, we can do that, but also 500,000 is not a problem because we can scale up very easily. At least since Odoo 17, we have a very user-friendly interface. I don't know if some of you maybe knew the older Odoo versions, but the 17 is, I think personally, very great in its interface and very user-friendly by now. It's very adaptable and flexible. So out of processes that are standardized, we can actually adapt them very easy to what is needed in the special department of the ministry, for example. If there is a process in place, we can create automation, we can create rules, we can adapt, we can insert fields, whatever we want to do, we are very, very flexible to adapt the process. And to do that, what we usually do is we need a lot of trust building in these kind of organizations to actually start the process of digitalization. And here Odoo helps us a lot, because at least in Germany, we do not want to use big US tech companies to handle all our data. And Odoo in that case is completely GDPR compliant, thank you. And we can actually always give our government institutions the opportunity of either hosting here in Europe with our Odoo SH, or on our premises, or to host directly in their buildings and go to them and organize all hosting and their data security and management of their own data and their server farms for themselves, which means that we do not have the problem of actually somebody coming up to us and saying, oh, we don't know, is the data going to be processed somewhere in the US? Who has access? What is happening? We can actually say, no, you are going to be responsible for your own data. This is what you can do, and we actually help them a lot with that. So that's a great part for step number one, trust building. Step number two, what we usually do is we do not go into a ministry or a governmental institution or even a non-profit and we say, now everything's digitalized. Now you have to work in Odoo 24/7. We do it step by step. And in this case, as you can see on the right, we have a lot of apps. Maybe some of you already use Odoo, maybe some of you don't. You actually can enable and disable for certain user groups the number of apps you have. So that means you can start by introducing them to one app and one process. And then you can get into them and say, how could we digitalize the next process? How can we build a connection between the two apps? Where is the connected logic? Which means that for them, Odoo is starting to become something new, but their friend, because they're not completely overloaded with the new software, which has been one of the main results on why digital transformation has not worked in our governmental institutions, because people were overloaded. Suddenly they were told, here's a new tool, this is what you have to do, this is what you have to use. Okay, we're missing a signal here. Yeah, oh, we're back, perfect. And people were completely, we still good? Is that on my end? Is that on your end? Okay, let's try. Yeah, sorry. Can you still hear me? Brilliant. I think somebody of Odoo is going to help us look at the screen and look at the perfect. Okay. You guys tell me if we're good to go? Brilliant. Thank you, guys. Awesome. Okay. So, main problem has been sitting people in front of a new system and just telling them, that's what you have to do now. Missing training, missing onboardings, new technology that does not fit their cases, and what we then do is we come in with Odoo, we start with a lot of trainings, we start with asking questions about how our process is done now, and what we do is just step one is we digitalize in baby steps, right? I told you about the experience in the school. The first thing we did is we just took that PDF that they had and made a website out of it. Just easy step one, in 1 week. And everybody saw that and was like, oh, this is amazing. This is exactly what we have. I don't need to be afraid. I don't need to learn something new here. And then the second step was just that it doesn't get printed out, but sent directly to a database. And as they looked on it, they kind of figured out, oh, wait, this is exactly what I would do if I print it out and then type it into my Excel. You actually saved me a couple of minutes here every day on transferring that. That is amazing. And so by every week taking one baby step after another, you had people that were concerned about this transformation and maybe potentially not knowing what will happen to their jobs, becoming the most fans of Odoo and the system we implemented for them, which was one of the key successes, because these people then transformed from people being against the change to people being fans and people becoming actually so involved that they came up with new ideas themselves on how to improve the processes, where we needed to take a little break at some point and be like, guys, you have so many ideas, please, we need at least a couple of days to actually develop them, right? So let's do one idea after another. We will be as fast as possible together with you guys, but let's bundle these ideas and prioritize them together, because we cannot finish everything that you wish for by in the next 48 hours. That's just not going to be possible. But from people being completely against change to people not running out of ideas and wanting to do more, we had half a year of change management inside the ministry, and that was amazing to see. And so on step 3, so that was step 3, so streamlining this processes and building actually what they need. And now for the next part, I have a couple of examples for you on what we did, so that you get a little bit of imagination on what maybe problems could be or problems that you have faced for yourself. So what we did is we built a state-run. We use the events app that Odoo already has, where you can fantastically organize events. I think this big experience here has been organized through that app, with probably a lot of customizations also to make it as smoothly run as it is. And we took the core app and we looked at what does the ministry want to do. What do you actually want to achieve here? And they wanted to have a lot of representative events where, let's say, professors would be invited to, but other states would be invited to, the big CEOs, so all the important people come together. And for the ministry to do that, they will spend a lot of money on it, but they will also need to follow certain protocols, because it's very important to think about who sits next to whom, right? Who gets an invitation, who doesn't, and all these kind of stuff. And especially as we use state money to do this, we need to be very strict on how much budget we spend and how much we don't spend. And as you can imagine, it's not like maybe in a company where there's an event manager that says, this is how we're going to do it, maybe ask the CEO real quick. They say, yeah, you're good to go, and then they engage. No. In the state-run event, it's usually a long process of how we want to do it, how much money do you want to spend, and is it going to be executed exactly the way that we allocated the money for. Why? Because they then have to turn around and answer the parliament how the money was spent, right? So the proposal needs to be as exact towards the execution as possible. And so what we did, we phased the events out app in a couple of process steps where there was a need for approval so that the current level of political understanding that had been happened was logged in, which meant that everybody could come up with ideas on how to create the event, who was going to be invited, what was going to be the budget. But in the moment it was committed by the minister, for example, in this case, it could not be changed later on to not overrun state budgets or to not invite other people that were not invited by the government and who should just not be there, right? So this means that if employees or people working in this organization now have a new idea, they can always set up the proposal, and then when the event is committed, they can actually organize the event, spend the money, no problem, and tick all our boxes in terms of documenting them and sending all receipts and sending in how much budget they actually spend, to then automatically go back to Parliament and answer to where is our taxpayer money actually going. The most important part here was actually that, for example, the guest list is not possible to be changed after the important people have agreed on the guest list. I can tell you that these are the war rooms. This is where it happens, right? This is if we all agree on the guest list and then somebody changes later on, there's a lot of political confidence that gets lost. So these things had to be absolutely locked in. So this was one of the big use cases we had, for example, in terms of events. The second thing we developed was we developed an app that looks on donations and donation receipts. Because when you give out a donation, so we took Odoo standard, we took, in this case, all finance apps, receipts app, and the subscription app, and we looked at how does the process work in a normal, let's say, NGO, a faith-based organization, somebody that can actually get donations. And how it works is that you can donate to these kind of organizations and company, but for this donation to be tax deductible for you, you need a certificate and an official document that says how much you donated, when the money was received by the company, for what it was for, and all these kind of stuff. And as the law is pretty strict on what we need to do, it was actually pretty easy to build an app that focuses on exactly that, because if a donation comes in, we don't need an employee anymore who sits down and fills out this perfect form. We can just have it connected to the bank, get out all the information, for example, when was the money received, what user sent it, because somebody was already registered, or create a new user in our database, and then automatically create this receipt, have it double checked by a person, and then automatically be sent out, because this is actually worth money, as it is a tax deductible for the person who has been donating this. And as you can imagine, also here, when you have 15 donations coming in every day, there's a whole team sitting there and would have to do that by hand. Now it's not needed anymore. Now it just goes way faster. And yeah, you need to be very exact on this, because the German tax authorities, as you can imagine, are not very flexible on you doing mistakes on that kind of stuff. So technology here helps us being very, very precise. Yeah. Another use case we have is we use Odoo dashboards. Odoo dashboards, great addition in the last Odoo version, and highly improved in my personal opinion. Why? Because as these organizations run their businesses and run whatever program they should be running, for example, handling, as I talked before, right, students, business, paying them out money, how many students do we have, how much money was spent out, how long did it take to help with a request, for example. All these information need to be sent back to the government and need to be sent back to Parliament to actually be able to understand where the taxpayer money goes, right? We're always coming back to how did we use the taxpayer money. And what we did is we just create these automatic reports so that the agency at the end of the day doesn't need to count, we had these many requests, it took us on average 2 weeks to solve this. And for this reporting to be done completely automatic by Odoo, because Odoo has all data points, can map all processes, and we just needed to figure out what data is important, what points do the parliamentary rounds actually need to be sent back, and in what in what timely manner do they need them? Do they need it one time per year? Do they need it every quarter? Do they need it monthly? And that was very easy to set up in Odoo. So high recommendation also for the dashboard solution. One of the last use cases that I brought with me today was the whole point of stakeholder management. What we did is we took the Odoo basic contact, I brought my own here, and we actually added one point that is called now mailing lists or invitee lists. And what can be done here is it can be looked in terms of political connection, can be looked in which circles and in which experts rounds is the person we have been invited also present. Because sometimes the government uses the same experts for all different topics, and they're not allowed to do that anymore. So they need to find different experts on different topics. And by doing this, we can make sure that all lists and all rounds, talking rounds, for example, consulting rounds in terms of also transparency, who is talking to the government, why, what did they want, is actually mapped out and can transparently be communicated. Perfect. I think from my end, that's it for today. Thank you for your attention. For me, the most important points here have been we can get very efficient with Odoo, as we can map processes, understand, learn, and help also the government restructure themselves. We have a high compliance and transparency focus, especially financial management, right? This is what I've been talking about a lot. It's taxpayer money, donation money. How does it get spent? Let's be transparent about that. And then stakeholder interactions, who is talking to whom and why, also a big transparency topic. I think the last point in terms of implementation success is we can actually help government institutions change their processes, and sometimes we, in the long run, have to change a little bit the laws to make the processes more efficient. And that's quite a cool discussion that you can have with employees of the government, which then tell you, this process is so inefficient because law number, I don't know, 58A says that we have to do this step after this step after this step, A, B after C. And when we can tell them with technology we can do A to C and then approval for B, they can then translate that into a new working order law for the ministry, which then might in the long term be applied so that all of the processes get done way faster, and also more efficient, which basically saves us all some money because it's taxpayer money. And I think that's quite a nice use for Odoo. Thank you so much for your attention today here and also on the stream, guys. Thank you. Is there a question? Do I need to put this up?
Okay, so there's a question in the pad. It's more of a... It's also interesting personally, because it's a module we just launched. So the question is, do you have any plans on implementing or using the NGO industries module? And how would that impact your current workflow, if any plan?
Yes, we have. We're building this out more. Just to give a little context, we've only founded the company a year ago. Mm-hmm. So most use cases we take on go out and have been done in the last year, right? There has been this pre-project of the story I told, which is 3 years old now. But yes, we're using this more, but in this case what we need more is the localization.
For accounting
purposes, for example, because
complex.
As I said, German tax authorities are not to be joked with, and we need to have it perfect in terms of...
We know that very well. Okay, interesting. Is there anything of the specific workflows you spoke about that are planned to be in Odoo by default?
Honestly, I'm not sure about this because those are always highly customized.
Right.
And sometimes, for example, these approval processes might be something that could show up in Odoo events, especially if it's about budget. How much budget did we plan? How much, like these kind of stuff. Usually we are in exchange with Odoo itself, right,
Yes.
and give in some
Once
ideas.
once you get studio in the way with approvals, it gets,
Get
complex.
exactly.
You have
So
to know what you're touching.
exactly, and so often when we have it in one client, and then we see, oh, this might be something that could be helpful for others. We try to replicate it, and then at some point we figure, oh, this might be a module that's interesting for everybody.
So
and
you
then
decide to actually
scale it up, and either we build something new out of it, or we talk to do on what's the plan. Do you want to do something about it? Do you have long-term plans with this or not?
I see. Okay, interesting. Thank you. Is it hard to retake every process from scratch, or did you remake them with some study of the existent and drop the unessential?
No, so that's actually quite easy because most processes in government institutions are fixed because they have working orders of how something has to be processed. So if the form comes here, you have to do step A, B, C, check this or this, and then if this happens, so people working for the government are always very strict in what they need to do. So these processes are usually there already, which means we don't start with zero, we map it with them, and then we reflect, and we tell them, could we automate this? Because the system, maybe if we do an AI integration or something, could already know if this is A or B or C, and then recommend you the next step, right? So the starting point is very high because
I can imagine the initial step is with all paperwork, you have to understand how it works.
Exactly.
And then once it's done, it's not gonna change much. So
that is absolutely true. And in this case, they already know their processes.
Right.
So often you don't come. So in Germany, you don't come into a government institution and they have no idea what they're doing. Usually they know what they're doing, but it's slow. It's a lot of paperwork, and we can help with that.
Okay. Interesting.
And by the way, one comment, I had been talking about Germany a lot, but also, for example, if you look towards Portugal, the whole Portuguese education system is, for example, run on Odoo open source, or a prescription.
I didn't know this. That's
prescriptions, a lot of medical processes when you get a prescription and then want to get you a medication is also done in Odoo in the whole of Portugal. So Germany is not the only country developing this and going into this direction.
That's actually impressive. Okay, I'll let time to write the last question. Okay, so I want to write a LinkedIn post and publish to my followers to spread what and awesome things your company is doing.
Cool. Thank you.
Can I do it? How can I connect with you on LinkedIn? And I capture videos and photos alongside to post. So
brilliant.
I guess anyone that wrote this question can just
absolutely fantastic. Please
get in touch directly.
Either reach out, or I will. I mean, we are in hall 10 at booth B1, but I will quickly put my name up again. And you can directly tag me in LinkedIn or just shoot me a message real quick, whoever that was. I love it. Please.
So feel free to tag Nicholas directly.
And let's directly connect afterwards.
I think that was our last question, unless we have last minute question from the audience directly. Seems like no. Okay, well, thank you so much again for the presentation.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.